I don't know if you can hear me or no, not yes. Yes, you can hear me? Um, I don't know if we can start or we wait for. On peut commencer, c'est. We can start? Yes, okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the IDFC pavilion for here at the COP30 in Belém. It's a very great privilege to gather with such a distinguished group of practitioners, policymakers, and finance professionals for what promises to be a crucial conversation about scaling up adaptation finance for nature-based solutions. As IDFC facility, we are indeed very proud to co-organize this roundtable alongside with our partner at WWF International and UNEP WCMC. Together, we represent a shared conviction that nature is not simply something to protect. It's more than that. It's one of our most powerful allies in building resilience to climate change. As development finance institutions, we see firsthand the impact of climate change across the region we serve. More frequent floods, droughts, rising sea levels, communities displaced, livelihood disrupted. The adaptation imperative is urgent. It's indeed growing. Yes, despite this urgency, investment in nature-based solutions for adaptation remains far below what is needed. Adaptation finance itself lags behind mitigation, and within what that's already insufficient pool, nature-based solution services only a fraction of the attention and capital it deserves. Just to give you an example, for the collectively the 27 banks that compose the IDFC club, the adaptation finance represents only 20 billion euro on average compared to the 150 more on mitigation. Just to give you the ratio between adaptation and mitigation, despite the efforts and the commitment that you made. Just to give you the picture of what we are saying, really the gap is very big. So this is, I think it is important that during this morning, we aim to diagnose why that gap persists, and more importantly, to identify the pathways forward. The financial instruments, enabling activities, and collaborative approaches that can unlock investments at the scale required. We are indeed honored to have representatives from leading institutions around the table today, and we look forward to a very frank, it's important, solution-oriented dialogue that can inform not only our own strategies, but also contribute to broader momentum for nature-based solutions. With that, I'd like to turn the floor to over our partner from WWF to introduce the rest of the station. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mustafa. Can you hear me well? Thank you. Okay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Vanessa Morales. I am Senior Specialist on Climate and Nature Nexus for WWF International. So very happy to have you here today joining us for this very important event, where we want to discuss also a very important topic, as Mustafa mentioned before, which I also believe that we recognize that is strongly instrumental to achieve our climate and biodiversity of common objectives, which is nature-based solutions, right? So this is a starting point. Nature-based solutions can contribute not only to achieve those common objectives on climate and biodiversity, but also to integrate actions and to bring benefits to people on the ground. Nature-based solutions, as you may know, have already gotten a multilateral recognition, not only at UNEA, but also in the 3 Rio Conventions, as a mechanism that can help us to address these societal challenges, keeping ecological integrity and also creating social benefits while respecting rights. But let me add something. For this event, we are going to talk about nature-based solutions, definitely, but we want to also focus the discussions on another big challenge, which is the adaptation, right? And how these are connected. Adaptation, as you know, it's a moral imperative, and we must also, it must also be an economic consideration, right? it is affecting livelihoods, ecosystems, economic activities, and resources. So at this COP, it's being named or labeled as the implementation COP, right? And the COP of action. So it is important to integrate and to connect what we have already developed for adaptation and nature-based solutions, but also what we know is still pending to do this implementation, which is finance, right? So to implement and to scale, we need more ambition and to unlock these financial resources. We know that despite there's been progress and traction, we are, as Mustafa mentioned, we are not yet there in the finance we need for nature-based solutions. So what are these barriers behind this, preventing this scale up, and how to overcome them is what we also want to discuss today. And just also briefly, let me mention that as part of UNEA consultations that came out of this UNEA 5 resolution, the consultations that were taken with governments, parties and governments discussed and also demanded more capacity building to make nature-based solutions more a public policy that can contribute to achieve these climate diversity objectives. And I want to quickly introduce you to where this project that we will be discussing today too is the partnerships for large-scale adaptation through nature. The PLAN project is where it comes in this context, right? It is a collaborative effort between WWF, UNEP WCMC, with the support of the Moore Foundation. And the objective is to advance nature-based solutions for adaptation. We are working on these three things, identifying barriers and exploring to integrate NbS in climate adaptation policy, finance, and planning. We are trying to understand which are the barriers, and we are having this conversation today for this, and which are the enablers to scale NbS for adaptation. And we want to work on co-designing a platform, a global platform that serves as a platform for technical assistance to governments to scale up nature-based solutions. So having said that, I thank you again for joining us today, and I also look forward to an engaging discussion on this topic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vanessa. So my name is Najma Mohammed. I'm the head of nature-based solutions at the partner organization, UNEP WCMC. Thank you to the IDFC for partnering with us for this event. I think, you've got convening power. And as we said, we want this to be a frank, conversation about what's working and what isn't. So I want to give you just an indication of how we'll run the roundtable. We wanted to have an informal discussion, so we moved the chairs so we can actually have an opportunity to engage better with one another. I will share with you just a little bit of an insight on what we have over the last 4 to 6 months through an extensive engagement identified as some of the key barriers and challenges. And then we will start the roundtable. We will have 2 rounds, and Vanessa and I will share the moderation between us. We've asked about 4 to 5 public development banks to open up the discussion, but this is by no means, a panel. So we want this to be a roundtable discussion, and we will take the topics one by one. We will go through the barriers and then looking at the solutions. So yeah, if I could ask for the next slide to be shared so that we can just start. Yeah, maybe it's better if I just stand. Yeah, this side. So next slide, please. So we all know that we have, since the UN, the UN Environment Assembly resolution, a definition of nature-based solutions in multiple ecosystems, in different ways of working with nature, but very clearly with a mandate of people, addressing a societal challenge of climate and of biodiversity. We often hear nature-based solutions for adaptation termed in a different way: ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, eco-DRR, nature-based solutions for climate resilience, or green infrastructure and natural infrastructure that this audience, might be more familiar with. But there are sort of 3 key dimensions of NbS that have to be core for it to be a nature-based solution. It must solve a persistent problem facing society, improve biodiversity conservation outcomes, and adapt to the negative impacts of climate change. So the next slide, please. I mean, we've all been sitting with this difficult figure, since the adaptation gap report came out, an annual adaptation bill of up to US dollars 365 billion. And we know that we've actually seen, as I will show in the next slide, a little bit of a step back with adaptation finance. So how are we going to pick this up? A little bit of key facts and figures that some of us have been seeing this week, an adaptation finance gap, as I've just shared, but also the potential that we will not reach the Glasgow Climate Pact, the goal of doubling international public finance, adaptation finance, which would be approximately 40 billion. We're also seeing that the biennial transparency reports are increasingly showing that there's a commitment to adaptation. But we know, and this is why a conversation with a community like this is refreshing, because this is a community of doers. So we need to be able to find out, how do we translate those commitments into action? And lastly, I mean, all of you know, and I've heard it at this pavilion and from development financiers, that the public finance cannot do it alone. There's got to be a way that we can open up the market, you know, for private sector investment to step in. So next slide, please. There's an incredibly interesting report that has just come out, and I've not been able to get my head around it, but it's the rise of the adaptation economy. I've heard people say that adaptation is not just one dimension of climate change. Adaptation is development of the future. It's how we're going to have to approach development and development finance, I would say. And as the Union Secretary General said, it's not a cost, it's a lifeline. Next, please. So over the course of the last 4 to 6 months, you can have the next slide, please. We have had a process of actually, as Vanessa shared with you, we are in this process of trying to understand what are the technical needs to scale adaptation, finance, policy, knowledge. We've been engaging with policymakers, practitioners. We've done an initial assessment. We've produced 4 or 5, I think, technical briefs out of that assessment. We then sense-checked to get it right from what we've assessed from the literature. We had 4 regional technical dialogues and expert interviews to complement that over the last 6 months. And and I will share today with you, very rough, but some of the findings of that. We've engaged in key forums on climate adaptation. We've just had the big research conference on adaptation futures. We had an opportunity with our colleagues from the Asian region to have a presence at the Asia Pacific Adaptation Network Forum that was recently held. And today, thank you to the IDFC, we are doing a roundtable with finance institutions, because we haven't yet had a lot of interaction with financiers at the roundtables, and we really want to understand, what are the gaps? What are the solutions from your perspective? Is it an issue of supply? There's not enough money? Or is it an issue of demand, that the projects aren't good enough, or they aren't packaged in a way that a development finance institution can make sense of it and finance it? So next, please. These are the overall barriers that we've identified out of the analysis. And we will zoom in today on the finance one. But I think one of the key findings, we really found that you can't look at these in isolation. So the arrows are meant to say that. But they are, you know, briefings on each of these barriers. So next, please. Yeah, what we want to share now in just the 3-4 minutes that I have left is really some of the barriers, the financial barriers that came out from the discussions. This is not from the literature. So yeah, next, please. We have barriers to finance, low investment levels, complex access, stringent contracting. And please keep this, if any of this resonates to you and you want to talk about it at the roundtable section. A lack of credible valuation metrics, being able to articulate return on investment or co-benefits, funding being mitigation dominated and not yet seeing even how mitigation finance can lead to an adaptation co-benefit. Short-term results versus long-term gains, which I think this community might question because you are into long-term financing. Project funding cycles being too short. Market mechanisms facing price volatility. So if you are going to go into the market mechanisms like the carbon credits, high initial investment costs, and difficulty building an investment case. So these are what came out of the roundtable, the technical dialogue discussions. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I mentioned before, that we found that even as we went through these barriers, there were questions of knowledge and skills and capacity. Do we have the knowledge and understanding in the project developer side to articulate a nature-based solutions project in a way that a development finance institute can engage with it and finance it? And also on the other side, you know, is there enough capacity, understanding, knowledge in the financial institution to understand what nature-based solutions are and how they perhaps can complement and build on existing? A little bit of the solutions, but this, I think, this roundtable will build on it. So next one, please. We have some of the solutions at the roundtable discussed, the technical dialogue came up with was simplifying access mechanisms for community-led projects. There were examples that were shared of community funds that had been established, innovative financial instruments, leveraging mitigation or carbon funding for adaptation, building stronger social cases. This is not conservation projects. I know that Bane and I both have conservation in our organization title, but I'm certainly not someone that's worked in conservation. These are sustainable development projects, which is the bread and butter of development finance institutes. How do you create new revenue models in areas that perhaps development finance institutes have not looked at before, like in agriculture or tourism? Realistic incentives, compensation for community participation, and again, engaging the private sector. And I think my final slide is really to set us up for the conversation that we were going to be having now, is 2 rounds of a roundtable. We're going to have 4 to 5 people just open the discussion for us on what are the barriers and the gaps for financing nature-based solutions. And then we will open it up so that we can have a bit of a discussion. Vanessa will do the first round, and I will take the second round where we start talking about what are the solutions, what are the tools. And I already heard yesterday some incredible tools that are being utilized by the public development banks. So thank you. And I think we have one more slide with a QR code. Yeah, if you are interested to read the briefing notes that we were producing, which we enhance all the time when we have a conversation like this. So they are working documents, and hopefully by early next year, we will consolidate and do a gaps and solutions sort of report. So thank you very much. And Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Najma. Okay, so we start our conversation. Let's start with the exchange on the barriers and risks in financing NbS. Okay, I have it here. Thank you. So as Najma mentioned, you are the implementers and know from the work they're doing, which are these barriers. So I would like to start asking, well, we have 3 questions that we have put forward for you, and of course you can answer any of them. I will. Oh, okay. So then I'll take it. Thank you. Okay, maybe I will start with the 3 questions. The first one is, what are the most pressing challenges to finance NbS for adaptation? The second one would be, where do risks concentrate? Policy, technical, market, pipeline metrics. And the third one would be, do these challenges differ across geographies and sectors? So I would like you also to ask you if you could keep to 3 minutes in your intervention so we can have more time for discussion. I would first call on Toru Yoshida from JICA. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Toru Yoshida from Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. And thank you for this opportunity to share JICA's perspective on financing nature-based solutions for adaptation. First of all, let me explain JICA's unique features. JICA provides funding through multiple schemes like technical cooperation for capacity building and institutional development, and grant aid for facilities, and concessional loans for infrastructure. And also, we also have the private sector window for overseas investment and lending. So unlike many other pure PDB or DFI, JICA combines 3 financial functions with technical cooperation and grant aid. So this is a very unique approach of JICA, and we are integrating approach to allow a wide range of projects from infrastructure to community-based initiatives. So this is the reason why JICA's nature-based solution work covers various sectors like forest conservation and restoration, agriculture and rural development, and disaster risk reduction, and water resource management. And to your first question, Our major challenge in financing nature-based solution for adaptation is securing long-term funding and maintenance. For example, in forestry projects, after planting trees or restoring ecosystems, I think continuous care or community involvement are essential. However, short-term funding often cannot provide enough follow-up. And another challenge is that nature-based solution benefits take time to materialize. So usually it only materializes in the medium to long term. So traditional investment evaluation tend to undervalue nature-based solution, making it difficult to attract private investment. And one way to address this is to combine nature-based solution with revenue-generating bankable infrastructure, or by highlighting the life cycle cost savings. And these approaches can make nature-based solution more attractive to investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very important points on the long term of nature-based solutions and how we value them. I would now like to call on Rodrigo Garcia. Rodrigo Garcia from the Brazilian Development Bank.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you also for the invitation to be here, Najman, and on behalf of BNDES, I appreciate that. Well, I don't know if any of you know BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank, and we work here not only with infrastructure, but also with the social matters related to Brazilian society. So when we are talking about nature-based solutions for adaptation, we also need to take into account the population, the local communities that are being suffering with the climate change here. For example, in BNDES, we have a lot of support to mangrove restoration recently. It were like 8 projects, roughly $10 million US. I know that's a small amount here, but this kind of project can change the lives of those people there. So we really believe that besides all the adaptation measures that we take, we must take into account our social license to operate. We need to bring prosperity to Brazil, to generate income for these communities. We also have, for example, another initiative on coral reef restoration. There are going to be 12 projects of about $40 million US. We can generate income for these people. We can generate income from tourism here. So bringing that together, we can just go beyond the problem that you mentioned, Najma, about adaptation being seen as costs, not as an investment here. So at BNDES, we do believe that when you change the mindset of the private sector, that they can earn money from that, then we will be successful in our initiatives for nature-based adaptations.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. And I think it connects very well with what Tori mentioned on how, of course, bringing the local communities is also very important for the sustainability and the long term of the projects also, right? So thank you for that. I would like to call now to Atika Ben Maït from the French Development Agency.
Thank you very much. Actually, you have presented a lot already, Najma, on the barriers and the obstacles for nature-based solution financing. But I want to mention something that is really important is our capability to compare the advantages between gray infrastructures and nature-based solutions infrastructure. There is a lack of metrics, definitely. There is a lot of qualitative. And when we are discussing with partners, there is still the habit of we trust more a gray infrastructure to protect ourselves. We trust more a big concrete dike than the nature-based solution projects that you're presenting. And I think there is a pedagogy and a conviction work to do towards our partner to show that there are a few examples. that's what we do sometimes in study tour, and we present a few projects that are being implemented in France to protect from a flood. And Yoko, you were here in July, and you've seen in Paris area a project that is existing at the moment to protect Paris from the flood. And I think it's one barrier that that has been presented, and also it's not in the habits of all the project teams. I think it's another habit to give a top-down incentive that we have at least to ask ourselves in the questions in the beginning of the appraisal process. If you put that in the checklist, is there a potential for nature-based solution? Is it interesting? And for instance, for wastewater treatment plant, for flood management, nature-based solutions are actually more cost-effective on the long run. Yeah, not on the but on the long run, it is most cost-effective. So I think this is also this to give the right incentives for the teams to include that. And as you said, of course, adaptation still has a room to develop. We have all focused a lot on mitigation, and I think actually that for most of us as public development banks, we are catching up on adaptation. For AFD, it's 40% of our climate finance. And I know that a lot of other IDFC members have good numbers, and MDBs like African Development Bank have good numbers. So I think all the work that has been done, all the advocacy that actually, no matter what the efforts we are doing on mitigation adaptation is needed, is actually in favor of all these solutions, nature-based solutions for adaptation too. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Atika. Really, really important points that you have raised. I would like to call on Alexander von Kapher. I hope I pronounced it well. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, this is what my voice sounds. Okay. Interesting. Now, distinguished panelists, distinguished spectators, public, I'm very happy to be here in a crowded IDFC pavilion on a subject where everybody has to learn from. Also, we as KfW Development Bank. A lot has already been said on the relevance. Thank you, Najma, for quoting the adaptation gap report. I mean, it's already very, very impressive. Yesterday, Mustafa in a NbS side event here yesterday on the same pavilion, you mentioned more or less the same gap, just only for natural-based solutions. So really, the fragmentation is still fragmented, underfinanced. We have a lot of pilot projects, but it's not yet a natural reflex by default to take the nature-based solutions into consideration for reasons like I think Atika described very well. There's still a lot of resistance or maybe lack of knowledge when you should maybe rather opt for nature-based solutions. So I think in the meantime, there are more and more of good project examples. Yesterday, we were also briefly talking about Beira in Mozambique with terrible storm water based floods a couple of years ago. And as a result, instead of rehabilitating the dysfunctional gray infrastructure of drainage system, the city or the state of Mozambique and the city of Beira then decided to rather opt for a nature-based solution. I mean, it was maybe also not a very difficult solution to find because I mean there are mangroves around Beira. It is also located on a river delta, but anyway, it was also political, a decision to make. And finally, now with this project being successfully executed, there has been construction of a nature-based solution, retention basins, restoration of mangroves, a better urban resilience, and also increase of biodiversity. And this, Rodrigo, you were talking also about funds. This was, I think, the German budgetary effort for this was something around 5 million euros, so really not big figures. But it also had then pedagogical effects, like Atika were mentioning, because now this has been applied. This approach has been applied also by a lot of other cities in Mozambique. Supported by KfW or the World Bank and others. And I think we also have to learn from those experiences, communicate more, and also to see if they're usable and scalable in other countries. And as per KfW, we're also working on, well, we have implemented in the KfW Development Bank climate mainstreaming as a default for in order to really identify climate positive impacts at the very early design phase of every new proposed financing. At the same time, also deeper analysis of climate risk than before. And what we're doing now next year is similarly now introducing biodiversity mainstreaming. Similar processes, which will then take into account more than before adaptation, but also nature-based solutions approaches. And you should, more than in the past, then as a KfW project manager, justify why you're not first using, or at least taking nature-based solutions as an option into account, rather than having maybe the old school gray infrastructure a default option as a default set. And well, KfW is also working on a group basis on a new biodiversity strategy, which is also including nature-based solutions. And if we have maybe time in the second round, or if you want to learn more from it, we have from our corporate sustainability team, Barbara here in the public, who could also then elaborate more on that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And yeah, again, I think very important points on how we can learn more. I mean, on understanding well nature-based solutions and how we can mix also and think of gray-green infrastructure as we move forward in the planning. So let me invite Siloshini Naido from the Development Bank of South Africa.
Hi, thank you. I'm Siloshini Naidu, the head of sustainability. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay, so I really am not going to repeat a lot of what the colleagues have said, especially, you know, from the perspective of emerging market contexts in which we deal with. I'm going to touch more on that. And, you know, since the release of the work that we did via a white paper, and we collaborated with various partners in this room, that white paper in terms of nature-based solutions, understanding the risks on our investments from a portfolio side, working with the tools, the WWF tools, so the water risk filters, the GIZ tools, TNFD were our very strategic main partner in applying those tools and methodologies to our investment portfolio. From the lessons learned, there's some work to be done in terms of the valuation methodologies, for sure. The data side, there were certain asset classes that were quite challenging. Like, for instance, we have exposure to sovereign loans or corporate loans, where there's like 50 transactions or investments linked to a sovereign. There's so much opportunity in terms of streamlining into those types of deals, but those are seen as non-standard LMA conditions. So you can't put that into government-oriented deals, right? We know we're going to get to the point at some point where this is going to become mainstreamed, very similarly to the likes of Equator Principles and so forth. And it was very encouraging that we heard the news that now the ISSB have sanctioned the recommendations of the TNFD. I think it's going to go a long way because of the convergence that's inevitable. So I know that the SA government is in very advanced, deep discussions around climate disclosure and alignment to the ISSB, which obviously is going to enable the nature-based market inevitably. I just want to touch on 5 years ago, the SA market completely immature. I mean, Najma, you would know that. And because people have gotten around the climate side and understanding, for you to reach net zero, you're not going to be doing it without interfacing with the nature side of the coin, as well as the community side. So I really like what the colleague said. If we look at the just transition approach that the emerging market contexts are taking, we are very much for ensuring that nature-based solutions actually become your alternative green market space. And I see it as alternative green markets because there's so much of opportunity for the social side to come in, creation of green jobs, innovative solutions, where communities feel they're incentivized to do something different and learn. I want to talk and touch on one or two aspects that you've raised on in the report and you've outlined just now. Ecotourism is so important to drive. And if I think about the Mpumalanga region in SA, you know, you're not going to turn everyone into a green renewable energy engineer. No, you're not. These are asset classes we should leverage on the nature side, and we should be able to create innovative jobs, sustainable kind of practices that communities can latch onto, because we have those assets in our country, in the at least in South Africa and with the wider SADC region, to be honest. And then I want to talk about the methodology side. It's because every time we are faced with things like aspects such as nature for debt swaps, the valuation methodology is heavily criticized by not our peers, it is by the economists, right? They are nervous about the underlying assets that you are almost seen sometimes, and this is all to do with perception and perceived risk, which is not always correct. But if I look at our frontline teams, if they don't understand how to look for the opportunities, how do you think private sector is going to feel about it? How do you think government's going to feel about it? And government is highly constrained in terms of its priorities in these contexts. So I think a lot of capacity building internally, we are most definitely focused on trying to ensure our frontline teams, coverage divisions, origination, advisory teams are starting to look at pipeline that can come off the back of one, existing investment portfolio, and then two, obviously outward looking, where you're not just looking at these deals as $1 or $2 deals, right? It can become quite catalytic. And there is a role for the public institutions to play in that you try to bring this up. It's that spot between concept and catalytic capital before it gets up to project prep stage. That is what's required right now, I can tell you, from an emerging market context. I'll just stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siloshini. Very interesting. And I mean, a lot of the points that you have raised were raised, some of them by the countries that we discussed. I think the capacity building keeps coming from different perspectives. Also, even a comment from one, remember, it's we should train the donors, right? The funders, because of course, also going back to understanding what nature-based solutions are, nature-based solutions with integrity, it is really important. So I want to open the floor now for anyone that wants to add any comments or from your experience, which other barriers you think you could identify from your work. Anyone wants to jump in?
Thanks. And I think a lot of the barriers have have already been identified. I mean, certainly financing for nature-based solution is a nascent asset class. But I think the market, we say we're where energy was 20 years ago, but the difference is that the solutions in energy are technological and can be standardized. So you put in solar panels anywhere in the world and it contributes to GHG emissions reduction. Whereas with NbS, it's local. So mitigation global, as we all know, adaptation local. The landscapes matter. The people within those landscapes matter. The economies of the countries matter. So that's a clear barrier. But I also think, just to be a little provocative, and I talked to Najmi before, I think siloing NbS to mitigation or adaptation is a barrier. NbS has the advantage and the disadvantage of being multiple benefits. And in this case, if we're just looking at things that are clearly adaptation, it limits, I think, the pool of finance that's available. I'll provide an example. I mean, I'm with the Climate Investment Funds. We work through our MDB partners. We're represented here. So in Brazil, we have a $50 million program that's actually working through the Ministry of Finance, who's then allocated this CIF financing to BNDES. That's being blended with $100 million of World Bank money and another $100 million of BNDES money. It'll go into lines of credit that BNDES has already established and be onward lent to private sector. The main goal that Brazil wants to see out of that is mitigation. Brazil is a contributor globally to greenhouse gas emissions, and that's their priority. In Ethiopia, where we have about a $40 million program, there's a huge focus on restoration there. But that's really about soil management, water, and local economies. And the government there is so committed to this that they have their Green Legacy program where they've committed 1% of their annual budget to this restoration focus. So getting governments behind this sends a very clear signal to investors like us and others in the room and our MDB partners that there's predictable finance that's going to lead to long-term gains. So I think in a sense, it does us a little bit of a disservice to break this down. We have two restoration programs, essentially putting in trees. One of them says it's more adaptation, the other one says it's more mitigation. That's fine. We leave it up to the countries to pick their entry points, make the determination of where their priority is. But if we're trying to channel finances one way and say, no, we're not concerned about the other side of this and the benefits, I think that can be fairly limiting. So I would open up not just to mitigation adaptation. There's biodiversity credits. There's livelihoods. Najo and I were in a session we led yesterday on NbS and jobs. So thinking a little more broadly and widening the pool as opposed to narrowing it, I think it would be a helpful thing to do going forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I completely agree with you. And of course, we wanted for this discussion to focus on only on adaptation for now, but and of course connecting with the idea of what you mentioned, right? How can we also get countries to really start investing more and getting these projects? So we wanted to focus this time in adaptation, but we completely agree that this needs to move beyond that. And we want definitely to touch on these other aspects too as we move forward. So thank you for that. Anyone else that wants to jump in? Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Gomez from the Adaptation Fund. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to point because he made me think about the silos that exist within adaptation itself. Adaptation has a number of different sectors, and no matter whether it's a disaster risk reduction project, whether it's in a specific setting like a fragile and conflict affected area, or any other setting, the need for working nature doesn't really go away. And what we've seen through our portfolio, no matter the type of sector, there is to some extent ecosystem-based adaptation or nature-based elements mainstreamed or within specific activities itself. And through the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator Program that we work with UNDP and UNEP CTCN, we saw how indigenous knowledge could be leveraged when it comes to working with nature-based solutions. And there are many interesting examples from our portfolio in Tanzania, where, for example, rangeland grass species that are traditional and indigenous have been revived through Maasai communities that have been able to identify specific species, or whether it's working with communities in DRC, looking at reviving edible caterpillar trees that have provide also a food source to the community. So in this sense, there is a need for accessible finance, and we're trying to do this through the accelerator programs where locally led approaches can get financing. And we're also learning from our partners on what can we do to adapt our criteria for proposals. So if you want to work with indigenous communities, for example, we need to make our criteria accessible. So that's something that we're trying to implement, and it's a work in progress for us.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sandeep Talmirai from WWF. I'm the Global Advisor on Climate Change Adaptation. So I like the point what Paul has said, but when we definitely look in the NbS from climate adaptation and NbS as a whole, the approach would be different. For example, what we had expect, because when we look the NbS for adaptation, we really need to understand the climate risks. Without understanding climate risks, it may be a little bit more complicated whether what's the final outcome. I'm just giving one example. In one of the local communities where we were planting the mangroves, later on, because of the sea level rise, the mangrove was not been able to preserve the local community. The reason behind, and they are saying this adaptation is getting failure, and we are using the NbS intervention. The reason is because the community was not been able to understand the climate risks, right? So planting mangroves is definitely an NbS approach. It may have other benefit, but it was not done in the right way of understanding the climate risk. So that's why the focus, what we are really trying to understand is the NbS adaptation and NbS of mitigation varies in terms of how you approach. So I think that's also one of the angle we need to really educate it or really things as we move forward, because definitely NbS has all different societal challenge, but what is our ultimate goal? Is ultimate goal building resilience, or is our ultimate goal reducing, let's say, carbon footprint? And the approach could be same, but when we look from an adaptation point of view, we need to understand the local risks, what the future climate impact scenario could be. Those are some of the key elements that we need to really look in moving forward. Otherwise, as the temperature increase, and we know that the nature-based solution is not a silver bullet. It will not address all those, let's say, climate impacts of climate risks. There are certain limitations of NbS, especially when we come to the climate change adaptation. So we need to understand that risk angle as well. I'm just trying to bring the dynamics over.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. And I would like to give the last chance if anyone wants to jump in, or otherwise, yeah, please.
Good morning, everyone. I am Abdullah Saho from the Gambia. I am happy to be part of this. Actually, I was passing by, but when I saw the how to call it, the heading, I thought this is important. And I'm happy that we have someone from AFD, because we recently have a project in the country that is working on that. But we also have a partners with Canadian. We are doing something on nature-based solutions in 2 of our protected areas. So actually, I think this is very important when we want to address climate change mitigation problems. Because a good example is we are working with the women on marine ecosystem, that is oyster, clams, and morio. Also, women, they produce, use wild fruits to, produce. We have like cooling station for them, and they also do processing, sort of processing unit. We do mangrove restoration, and access to microfinance, small scale microfinance, like green job. Also youths are employed from the communities. We call them climate ambassadors, who undertake awareness creation within the communities. So this helps a lot in addressing most of the challenge we are faced with in terms of protected area management, and now we are able to put in good governance also. It's like the communities are participating and they are taking ownership of the resources. So I just want to contribute that nature-based solution is really helping for us, working for us at the protected area level. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and yeah, of course, validating that all this work is worked on the ground. So I'm going to wrap up this first panel. Thank you so much for all your interventions and your insights. Please, round of applause for everyone. And we will move to the second panel.
Yeah.
Round table.
So thank you, I think, for your intervention. You took us right into a very positive story to start on a discussion on solutions. So we've shared with all of you 3 questions to, choose the one that you feel, you want to make the contribution to. So first was, how can MDBs, DFIs, and actually de-risk and crowd in private capital for financing nature-based solutions for adaptation? What financing mechanisms and models can be scaled? Which policy regulatory shifts are most urgent? And how can metrics and standards build investor confidence? So to start off the conversation, I'll invite Bradley Todd Hiller from the Islamic Development Bank, lead mitigation specialist. Maybe you can help us take the conversation into that direction.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today and to listen to the conversation. What I thought I'd do is just provide a bit of an overview. Islamic Development Bank, our current organizational strategy, I think you mentioned at the beginning, focuses more around green infrastructure. So that's the way that we've seen it in terms of terminology. But we also have a unique member country base. So over half of our member countries are fragile or conflict affected. So this changes the way that they see things through a certain lens. That means that our climate finance is often typically higher for adaptation finance than it is for mitigation finance, which is quite unusual amongst the MDBs. In terms of barriers, just very quickly, we're a South-South development bank, so we have less grants, so that causes us some challenges in these sort of emerging spaces. Also, in terms of demand from member countries, from our side, we often don't see requests for standalone borrowing for NbS, so this is something to think about. So what we do is then integrate it into conventional lending systems. Point that I think somebody raised was, I'm here with my colleagues, Greg and Yoko. We're champions of nature within our institutions, but you have to remember we're also a minority, right? We have, stock standard economists and financiers who we have to try to educate and convince about risk and all these sorts of things as well. So in terms of what are we doing to overcome these barriers? Knowledge, we're certainly working in this space. So we report with UN Habitat on nature-based solutions in the Arab region. And just yesterday, Yoko was kind enough to join us. We're looking at a concept around just land transition, which I think the person from South Africa talked about. So instead of energy, moving from decarbonizing, how do we move towards this land system sort of at a landscape scale? So I think these are quite important. In terms of financing, we use Islamic climate financing modalities. So we have the equivalent of green bonds, which are Sukuk, and we've just updated our standards to include adaptation specifically. So that I think can help us mobilize more money into that space. We have different crowdfunding sort of for civil society, which can help support communities on the ground in terms of NbS initiatives. I'll probably let the other colleagues talk about the joint MDB work we're doing on nature finance tracking, which I think is really critical. The last point I'll make is in our region, we have something, these guys are probably sick of hearing it, but we have something called the Green Initiative. And this is supposed to be the world's largest landscape restoration program. So this will have up to $2.5 billion of grant financing over 10 years. So for a bank like us, which has limited grant resources, this could be transformational for us, but also the countries in the Middle East, North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, and into Central Asia. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. That was excellent. I was really hoping that we're going to start thinking about dryland ecosystems, which I think, fall within your area as well. I mean, we're not all as blessed as Brazil with forests and lots, but, nature exists, in many forms, blue, green, gray. So do you maybe want to just share something just about nature-based solutions looks different in a dryland ecosystem?
Well, I think I did my PhD actually on ecosystem restoration many years ago. But one thing which is interesting is, say, an ecosystem like Brazil, can recover maybe more quickly
Yeah.
than some of the arid ecosystems. So we have to be very careful in sort of conserving them. And then rehabilitation strategies can take decades, right? And also in terms of markets, you know, innovative finance, carbon finance may be more attractive in the tropical forest, for example, than it is in some sort of arid or semi-arid context. These are also technical challenges as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. So next up, our Gregory Watson from the Inter-American Development Bank. Your reflections on what's working, what are you trying?
Thanks, Najma. I do want to kind of follow on what I agree with everything that Paul said as well about. I understand that we want to talk about adaptation, but I actually think the mix between adaptation and mitigation is super important. We're trying to reach scarce finance. And also somebody had mentioned at the beginning the topic of mainstreaming. And you know, we both do innovative finance and we do mainstreaming. And particularly important is looking for the opportunities we're going to have the biggest bang for the buck. For us at the IDB, we're really looking at mainstreaming in the infrastructure sector and in the housing and urban development sector. And we also are taking, I'm glad Brad mentioned it, a landscape scale approach that's programmatic, where we're looking at how do we bring NbS into traditional infrastructure for resilience, but also for mitigation, for biodiversity impacts. And we have a project that we just approved this year in Guatemala, which is maybe a different twist that I wanted to bring as an example, because it was a road project. And actually what we did was we looked to see how in the upper and higher level watersheds, reforestation and conservation has a 16-time benefit in terms of cost if you invest in that instead of repairs to the road. And so in this road loan that we were doing, because we were able to link to national forest incentive payments for mitigation, but also make the value case about the adaptation value to the road, the government included a very sizable component, I mean, multiple millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars for this kind of work into their loan from us for the road, rehabilitation. And so that's an opportunity to basically bring all of these worlds together into one project. And then the ultimate beneficiaries are the local communities who are receiving those incentive payments for the conservation and the restoration. So I wanted to kind of show an example that touches on all of this. Also in terms of other solutions, we are developing a technology platform, an NbS opportunity mapping tool right now. It's a digital tool that uses different kinds of ecosystems, geospatial, and also financial models to basically show project developers and who are not experts where and when NbS are appropriate in the design cycle, and then incorporate that into tendering, incorporated that into the upscale design of these kinds of projects, so that we're creating that kind of systems shift. That goes alongside all the policy work that we do through policy-based lending or through debt for nature swaps, where we have specific conditions in the frameworks to basically incorporate nature-based solutions into the Ministry of Planning or the Ministry of Public Works and how they make those decisions. Also, we do a lot of ecosystem service valuation at the IDB. We have partnerships with Stanford and others where we show the value of the Mesoamerican reef, not only for coastal protection, but also for fisheries, for livelihoods, for non-use value. And then with that data, we're able to create bonds. We're able to create parametric insurance products that insure the reef as natural infrastructure. And we do those in many different ecosystems, but that directly helps us scale the NbS portfolio. And I know we're here talking about adaptation, but I think we also need to look at the other financial mechanisms. So, we should be leveraging the carbon and biodiversity credit markets to support these kind of NbS projects. I think we should be looking at habitat banking. We have projects that are looking at how do we go beyond compensations to net gain with infrastructure developers that are doing NbS. And I don't think we should be limiting ourselves to one or the other. And then, lastly, you mentioned metrics. And so, we did, as MDBs, launched just a few days last week with the Brazilian government, with the 9 MDBs in the working group. We came together to create harmonized approaches to selecting metrics for nature finance products. And it has an annex where basically it walks you through the theory of change process and says, do I want to measure state of nature, pressure, response? And then based on the ecosystem, what are the appropriate metrics that I could use that are aligned with ICMA principles, that are aligned with TNFD, that are aligned with what investors want to see, so that we're limiting the universe of these metrics so we can aggregate and scale. And so I think that's another way that we can make this happen faster.
Thanks so much. It's hard to believe that I'm talking to the minority in the development bank, listening to all of you. I mean, the interventions are incredible. I think the way that you, I mean, I know that the division that you lead is on natural capital, and just seeing how essential, those valuation approaches are in making the case, I guess, internally and externally, to be able to talk the language that the rest of the teams understand, because it's not just your team that's going to put that deal, together. So thank you so much, Greg. I think there was a lot of inspiration and a lot of depth to what you've shared, and I'm sure all of us know, the leadership role that you play in this area. Yoko Watanabe, I will turn to you. Your thoughts from Asian development side, and what have you tried, the solutions? And I think that Bradley said that you could perhaps share what you're doing together, because I think you're definitely the majority here today. So enjoy this moment.
Well, that's really nice of you. I mean, because it is really true that we are minority in our organization. To get into like increasing investment, we really need to first of all work with our internal colleagues and really figure out. So in terms of barrier, I mean, a lot is already said, but barriers in terms of, and then I want to go to solutions, but yeah, so one is that in terms of barriers, I really find that the risk or uncertainty is a really big thing in terms of our organization as well as investors is concerned, because of course it's easier to just work on infrastructure that we know about, and there is already a system in place. And in our organization, there are a lot of heavy processes. And if you put in another sort of processes like nature-based solution, it really kind of gets that sort of why kind of thing. So I want to build on Anika's point of saying it is, even it's a traditional method, just the cost effectiveness really is a key sort of fundamental information that people can shift that thinking, because by showing that how cost effective it is to actually work on an NbS, like what we saw in Paris, was actually the maintenance cost has halved by rewilding the river rather than having a concrete structure. So that kind of model really helps to really replicate, and so that's one thing. And then in terms of solution, we're not looking at, I think, anymore a new mechanism per se. It's already, quite proven in many ways, but MDB like us, I think we have a, issue of scaling. Like we can scale those methods, and like biodiversity bond that we issued last year in ADB, among the first to issue those, these are really effective actually tool to bring in private capital. We issued $100 million bonds, and within 1 month, there were actually almost like a competition of who want to buy it. So I mean, there is a really increasing appetite to increase in these areas, as long as there is a clear impact and verification of these impact, and that's where the metric system actually comes in. Because unless there is a clear indication of results coming out of this instruments, it's really difficult to actually scale those initiatives. And then in order to scale these initiatives, one of the solutions that we brought in ADB is the Nature Solutions Finance Hub. So 2 years ago, we established a new finance hub to cloud in both sovereign and non-sovereign resources. AFD and OPEC Fund are the founding members together, but now European Unions and the GIZ and the others are coming in to basically develop a de-risking facility to bring in the resource that is needed to give that sort of certainty a little bit, and also be the first loss capital to bring in the resources. So I think these initiatives to bring in that scalable sort of origination of projects, and then bring in that new sort of scalable finance instruments are extremely important. And finally, I think, in terms of working on these, the collective efforts are really important. So MDB, we have a Nature Heads group with our working group very being active. So this week, as Greg mentioned, we launched the metric of nature so that we can show the impact. But at the same time, we also developed the nature taxonomy. So what do we mean by nature finance and NbS investment? So we have come up with sort of what we qualify, basically, and have some common understanding among MDBs to report and monitor. So I think these initiatives, by having that cross sort of fertilization and learning each other, really scale the work that we need to adhere. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yoko. I mean, I think there was a question in my mind following all three of you. I mean, it's wonderful to have the champions from the organizations. And I remember when I was based at the Development Bank of Southern Africa, there was this vision, you know, through the Pan-African Capacity Building Program that, you know, we need to train more people with this background and connect you. How do you find, you know, the bringing in climate, environmental scientists, thinkers, into the Development Finance Institute? Are all of you nurturing the people that can take over this champion role from you? I mean, is there capacity building programs that either cross the institutions or within the institution itself that actually builds up the skill to be able to identify the investment opportunities?
Yeah, so first of all, you know, in terms of internal capacity is concerned, we actually had a concerted efforts of training, executive training among all our senior management, including vice president to director general to directors, to all have understanding on climate, first of all. And I actually, from being a nature head, I want to do the same for nature.
Yeah.
We are making a step towards doing Oxford conservation training and stuff like that, so that we can develop our own capacity, but also bring in the developing countries as partners to these trainings. And actually, what we did in Paris was exactly that. The Cambodian actually parliamentarian and the government actually saw the impact of NbS on the ground, and they really said, "Oh, this is what we can do." And that kind of, you know, sort of lesson sharing and learning is really, really powerful in many ways. And then actually sharing that with the private sector is really also powerful in terms of bringing in the private capital, because there are actually equally struggling like us to come up with a metric, come up with a taxonomy. And there is a lot of, you know, learning that we can do together. And I think there is a growing, actually, I think, constituency and a community around it. And I'm pretty actually positive that even though the scale is quite less than what we need, but we're going to the right direction.
Yeah, please.
Could I just add really quickly two things to that? Because one is, you know, something that we're doing with the Jeff is creating a MOOC, a massive online course on natural capital valuation, not only for our own teams, but also for the governments. And it's going to be in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And then the other thing that we're doing at the IDB to build that, you know, next generation is that we're the secretariat of the platform of finance ministers of Latin America and the Caribbean on climate. And over the actually a year ago, they created a sub-theme within the group specifically on biodiversity and natural capital. And these are the finance ministers. So we're doing a lot of trainings, capacity buildings. We just published a paper that Frida, that some of you here know, drafted, which is about why, from a fiscal management perspective, is natural capital and NbS important? What is the role of those ministries in working on this, and what can they do? And then that helps them to train their own staff in their country. And then that builds the pipeline of people who can come work for us.
Thank you so much, Greg. I think our final speaker for this round is
some of our target.
Sorry? Cross channels. Our final speaker is Ignacio Lorenzo Arana from CAF. Your reflections on, you know, solution side of things, and what is, as CAF, you know, been doing to try and, you know, scale investment for nature-based solutions for adaptation. Thank you, Ignacio, for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's great to be in the IDFC pavilion. We're a proud member of the IDFC, and it has been a great work together on all of these issues of climate and nature. First, addressing just one of the last remarks about the need to have a very clear internal dynamic around this across the bank. First, for us, it's been a huge process under our current strategic planning from 2022 to 2026, where board and our executives, and in particular the executive president, have indicated that they want to drive us to be the green and blue bank of the region. So this has permeated across all of the institution, and you actually speaks to people, and they're somehow trying to figure out how to build on that, and that actually it brings a new area of work coming in together. Secondly, because of that, back in COP Dubai, we presented a new ecosystems approach strategy where we've identified 15 strategic ecosystems in the region. And let me just name them, because this is also important for us to recognize what we have on the ground. Of course, the Amazonian, but the Cerrado, the Mata Atlántica, the Pantanal, the Chaco, the Pampa, Patagonia, the Pacific Coast, the Tombe of Magdalena, the tropical Andes, the Paramos, the Ornaquia, the Mesoamerican corridor, you got the Caribbean, you got the mangroves, you got the coral systems, you got the Antarctica. So you have to understand that those have specific ecosystem functions and dynamics, and we need to understand them integrally as part of the region, but also individually on how they work. And that has been a huge change on the way that we are doing the climate and nature understanding and approach towards the project. And that brings us to 5 actions that we're doing through this strategic ecosystem. First, very traditional, how do we enhance our safeguards on the compliance part, but also on the mainstreaming, on the positive activities, and how do we go beyond compliance on biodiversity and climate actions. This information allows us to be much more precise on the kind of actions that we can bring on the ground across all of our sectors, whether it's transportation, energy, infrastructure, how we can build on specific solutions that go beyond compliance on this. Third, the origination of lending operations, operational lending operations, that if you see our portfolios, I believe that is the case for all the banks, we have very small, pure biodiversity, pure ecosystem portfolio. But again, if you start thinking and seeing those functions and how they relate to other specific areas of economy, just what we're seeing right now in terms of macroeconomy or fiscal, then you can start to see that there's also there lending opportunities on a pure biodiversity conservation approach that are actually economic return, high economic return. Four, who are the people working on the ground? We don't have all the solutions, not the whole experience. And if you see, there has a lot of institutions, organizations already working on these ecosystems. How do we better partner with them? Not to start things from a white paper, but rather to learn from what is already on the ground. And last, new financial institution. Of course, one of the things that we already say on the previous panel, of course, they're from nature swaps, they're the risking, the bio credits, the carbon credits, the environmental assets. We are working, trying to have one specific pilot with diverse instruments in each of these ecosystems together with a partner, whether it's blue carbon, whether it's traditional carbon markets, whether it's new carbon biodiversity credits. What have we learned 2 years from COP Dubai? First, and I believe you all guys will share this, the opportunity to integrate benefits, but the difference between the local and the global benefits, and who actually is the one benefiting from this, and how do you relate that market to them. Who can pay for that, who can exchange in a second degree market. Secondly, the severe difference that we have in terms of metrics and taxonomies across carbon, biodiversity, adaptation. We work under the IDFC taxonomies, and we also work together on that. And we see, if you see the degree of preciseness, not only taxonomy, but the documents behind those and the metrics that you have on carbon, we're really way behind on these other things. And of course, that relates to the first thing. How are the benefits? Who are the beneficiaries? And last is something that we also learn is that this is, of course, complex and uncertain, but it's also real. And you can find the real connections between that safe environment, that safe system functioning, and the rest of the economy. We have seen this in the growth of the agriculture sector. We have seen in the growth of energy sectors. So you can actually build a very clear point with complexity, with uncertainty, but the benefits are there when you have the conservation. And this is, I believe, our role to enhance and very much more precise approach to that bridge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you to the panelists for your fantastic interventions. Does anybody else want to share anything on a solution, an approach that has really worked? I do have a burning question that I would love to ask, but I would give an opportunity for anyone to want to share from another sort of public development bank perspective, a solution that you think, can really help scale nature-based solutions, finance for adaptation finance for nature-based solutions. Mustafa.
Thank you, Najma. I would like just maybe to add one thing, which is important about the approach that we should put forward to address the issue. I think that we cannot address the. It's very important to see what is the size of the project. I see a lot of similarities between nature-based solutions and energy efficiency. It means that for big projects, to add 5% on the top to a mainstream NbS is not a deal. The question there is about the know-how, which is very important. I have experience of project that's the owner of the project was ready to put the money, but there is no contractor expert on the issue, and at the end the project was a disaster because they give the project to the usual partner, which is not able to do it properly. So the money was wasted, in fact. So I think that as soon as we will put forward some solutions, well-designed solutions, substandard solution, I would say, we can address the big project. And this is here the question is to maybe to work with the government to that they can integrate in their public tender some specific requirements about that. Also to help the private sector to address properly what is NbS project. So I think that this is something that we could make it quite easily. And as soon as the commercial bank can take over, I think that we will be there. But the other issue is about more, I would say, small projects, which is more difficult. And it's not a question of emerging or leading or developing countries or lead developed countries, because we have the same issue in all of them. I mean, the small projects, there is in rural area, disabled population. I think this is where we should concentrate or maybe make our effort to understand how we can help this population to get benefit from nature-based solution. Because what we have so far, it's very small projects, only based on grants, and it's really difficult to make it at the scale, in fact. And this population are those who are suffering the most on adaptation or on the climate adverse impact. So I think we should differentiate this approach between these two categories of projects. For one, I'm very optimistic. For the second, I think that we should also try to see how we can make some cross benefits from what we get from the projects that are quite easy to address, for also making them benefiting to the rural area population.
Thank you, Mustafa. I think, Alexander, you wanted to come in as well?
I think. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Maybe three very short additional points. The first has already been said. The more we, I would call it knowledge, transparency, climate risk assessment, and data collection. So the more we understand the benefits of investment of nature-based solutions or the cost of not undertaking those measures, we will understand better that it is not just the cost, but it's a necessary investment, also giving us, of course, economical return. So I think some more tool elaboration and data collection has been done on this side, but this will make it then easier also to make economical decisions easier to invest into adaptation and nature-based solutions. The second one is I think you can also. Well, it's often said that mitigation investment is it's bankable more easily than adaptation. You can maybe argue or debate this or work on it, but I think there's still at least some truth in it. But then, as a consequence, you can also work on availability of funds for adaptation by working in the mitigation field more on maybe market-based finance. We as public development banks. Also as KfW, we also have now, of course, the situation as many other European countries that scarcity of funds, like also the colleague from the Islamic Development Bank said. This also now is sometimes also out of crisis you can create something new and take it as a chance. We are now working on new finance and guarantee mechanisms, relying less on budgetary funds, but rather really putting us in front of, as a development bank, leveraging own funds as on the market and not using budgetary funds for mitigation. in the future. As a consequence, the remaining budgetary funds can be used then more for maybe adaptation measures in NbS. And third and last remark, I'm also, well, I'm not here as a representative of the German government or as a politician, but I'm also confident understanding that adaptation remains a high priority for the German government. So Germany we have somebody from the Adaptation Fund. Germany has made a huge commitment to the Adaptation Fund here. Our State Secretary Jochen Flafsbart, so Germany's delegation leader, he is also now a co-facilitator of adaptation in the negotiation process, and Germany still remains also engaged to, at least for its budgetary funds, to commit at least 50% on adaptation within the climate finance. So this also gives us, I think, a good impulse and hope for the future to work, to be on track to work on this matters.
Thank you so much, Alexander. I think we're heading towards wrapping up. I see the person who's going to help us wrap up has just joined us. But we have time for maybe one more question. Anyone wants to add? Otherwise, I do have a burning question. So when we were doing the regional dialogues, one of the big questions, so all of the barriers and the solutions I shared with you basically came from the policymaker and practitioner and project developing community. We didn't really want to have, financiers joining the roundtables. And it's interesting that you said that they reflected a lot of the barriers, as you see them as well. But the one area that was raised, and I think the colleague from the Adaptation Fund raised it as well, is direct access to funds. I think, locally led adaptation. We know that adaptation, happens, at, quite a local level, at the municipal level, at the community level. So I just would love to hear the thoughts from anyone on, because this was a question that came up in the technical dialogues, is how do we get the funding, down? And you have my sympathies, because I have worked in a development finance institute and I know what the due diligence is like. And I know that it's the same amount of work, for the quantum of funds. So I understand the role of intermediaries. And I just, if there are any good examples that you'd like to share on how to get the funding down to the. Thank you, Mustafa.
Well, thank you very much. The one example that I can share is ADB is actually implementing with the Green Climate Fund Finance, a community adaptation facility. And this is a 240 million sort of funding that we got from GCF to implement exactly a local level, more SME level, sort of a smaller scale investment that is really required to innovate on the solutions for NbS as well as adaptation. And the expert is actually in the delegation, so I can introduce. But I think there are good examples that we can draw from, and there are ways that our institution also for smaller grants, we have also special sort of procedure as well that is much lighter than the larger scale investment.
Yes, thank you so much. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks. So, so part of the portfolio I have has a dedicated financing window called the Dedicated Grant Mechanism for Indigenous People, Local Communities that started with our Forest Investment Program, and now it's part of my Nature-Based Solutions Program as well. And, as I said, we work through MDBs. So this goes to an MDB, and they work at the country level to have self-identified leaders within the local communities and indigenous communities to form a national steering committee that makes all the decisions. So the governance is set there, but all the infrastructure around that still relies on the development bank's own safeguards, dispute mechanisms. I'm not going to say that's easy, and that is one of the greatest challenges that we have, because the funding that comes out in subgrants is at the bite-sized chunks that communities can use. They've averaged $31,000 a subgrant. There are over 700 subgrants. We have 74 million in the Forest Investment Program, another 40 in our Nature-Based Solutions Program. This is an approach we're now planning on replicating for our new resilience program called the RISE, so that we can have a very similar approach on locally led adaptation. So there's this example. There are other examples that are out there in terms of governance structures. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses. I mean, we do play an intermediary role, and that keeps our donors happy because they know that the same fiduciary requirements and safeguards that they need for $100 million loan are going to be met through this. And it also puts the decision-making fully within the hands of the indigenous and local communities themselves. And so that leads to a sense of self-determination and empowers them to do the types of solutions that they see. So we'll see how it goes as we replicate this within our new program. And hopefully we have, similar good stories to tell down the road.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to end on a good story note, I think. We all need to take it back. I think, Vanessa, we probably need to wrap up, right? I mean, from my side, it's been, we've done, as the partner on the program, have done a lot of the regional technical dialogues. I've had an opportunity to speak to policymakers, project developers, practitioners, and thank you so much, Mustafa, for an opportunity to access, this incredible community and I think champions of nature-based solutions and climate resilience in I think what will be critical institutions as we go forward, to this journey. And we will be integrating your insights, improving the work that we have done, and hopefully come back to all of you with what we found, and so that this can nurture stronger relationships for all of you who are championing this work, through your institutions. I think, Vane, anything from your side to wrap up? Also, I do think we have an opportunity to invite our colleague from WWF, Manuel Pulgar-Vidal, who's the Global Climate and Nature Lead, to just wrap us up for where we want to go forward with this work. Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I've just been in an event in which the 3 Rio Convention presidency released the Belém joint statement to promote synergies. And when I think about synergies, there is nothing more synergetic than nature-based solutions. But let's think on this. It is not just of promoting synergies in the top level or in the global arena. It is to promote synergies in different levels. And what I know it is that today you have discussed on how to connect what you are developing or in the global or in the national level with local communities, something that it has been well addressed. Because when it is about nature-based solutions, it is to work with people that it is on the ground. And that is so important. How can we connect with them? How can we engage them into nature-based solutions, initiatives, and interventions to promote more effectiveness in the action that we are trying to develop? Also, what I know it is that when we think about nature-based solutions, it is to work together in mitigation and in adaptation. So not to break silos, not to create silos, but to break it. The way it is that by working on climate, we have to integrate both, because mitigation and adaptation are the 2 sides of the same coin. Both are related to the climate crisis, but also it is related to the biodiversity crisis, to all the challenges that we have to address. A third idea with this synergetic approach, it is that we have to recognize that nature-based solutions, it is not just for climate. It is for food security, it is for water security, it is for disaster risk management, among some other big challenges. And also I know that when we are talking about barriers and enablers, one of those related to how can we measure progress? How can we track that we are progressing in our action? How much we could, or what should we consider as a way to continue evolving by using this tool? IUCN, it's an organization that it has just updated its standard for nature-based solutions. I think that is a very good first step, but it is not enough to have a standard. We do need to have more clear indicators. We do need to have more MRB and ways to metric, because if we are not able to do that, probably we can create confusion and also kind of greenwashing. So all the business sector, all the financial sector is looking for clarity. In this COP, we have heard more than once, we do need to have clear rules and clear ways to enabling those conditions. And I know finally, and this is more to the public side, that you have shared on what we are working on with UNEP, with UN, WCMC, WWF, and the support of the Moore Foundation. It is how can we provide technical assistance to build capacity on demand to national government, regional, local government, even communities that are looking on using this important tool as a way to promote that level of effectiveness that we are looking for. So I hope that by having this kind of discussion, for sure this is not the only one that we are having in this COP, and not the only one because we will have several others in the future. I hope that we can be able to create something strong that can strongly contribute to build that capacity that it is so important when we think about on the planetary crisis related to climate, biodiversity, and land. So thank you very much, Vane. Thank you very much, Najma, our panelists, for joining today in this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I just wanted also to say thank you to everyone for joining us today and just reiterate that we will come back to you with more information around the platform. Thank you so much.